Welcome back to another exciting project. We are building a BMI calculator together. In this project, we will calculate your body mass index. We often refer to this as BMI. The calculation uses your height and your weight. Our final project has two input fields. One field collects the user's height in centimeters. The other field collects the user's weight in kilograms. We have set some default values for our inputs. The height field starts with a value of 180 centimeters. The weight field begins with 80 kilograms. When we click the Compute BMI button, the calculation happens instantly. It uses the height and weight you entered. The result shows your BMI score and weight condition right here. Our default example of 180 centimeters and 80 kilograms results in a normal weight condition. For example, if we change the weight to 90 kilograms, the result now shows we are in the overweight category. For example, if we weigh 100 kilograms, the result shows obesity. For example, a weight of 50 kilograms would indicate an underweight condition. The program calculates the body mass index. It uses an if statement to check the result. This determines the final weight condition for the user. We will begin by setting up the project. We are using a modern neumorphism design style. Next, we will write the JavaScript code. This code will perform the BMI calculation for us. We will display the final results inside the input field. The text information will appear in this section at the container's end. So see you in the next section for the HTML part of the project. Welcome back to working on our BMI calculator project. We are going to continue building it together. In this section, we will build the structure of our page. We are focusing on the HTML foundation. I have opened the final version of the project for reference. This will help us compare our website with the final result. We can also become familiar with the project structure. Looking at the final project, you can see a title at the very top. Next, we have two number input fields. After those inputs, there is a button. Finally, there is another input field that displays the calculated BMI result. We also have some additional information text. This text appears at the very bottom of the container. Our next step involves creating a main container div. We will assign it a class of container. All our subsequent work will be placed inside this container element. We are going to start by creating our HTML file. This file will form the foundation of our web page. I will be using Visual Studio Code for this project. You can use any text editor you prefer. Just choose one you are comfortable with. We start by closing the Welcome tab that appears initially. Next, navigate to the File menu in the top left corner. We can click on the Open Folder option. This allows us to create a new folder. We can then open that folder directly inside Visual Studio Code. I am going to create our new project folder on my desktop. This location is easy for me to find and access. I click on the desktop location first. Next, I click the New Folder button. We will name this folder BMI Calculator. Now that we have created the folder, we can click the Select Folder button. This will open our new folder inside Visual Studio Code. The folder is now open inside Visual Studio Code. You can see it displayed in your editor workspace. We can see our project folder is now open. It appears inside the Visual Studio Code Explorer panel as BMI Calculator. Let us close the Get Started tab once more. We are now inside the Explorer section. We are also inside the folder we created earlier. To create our new file, we click on this New File icon. We will name this file Index. We will add the HTML extension to it. Currently, our HTML file is completely blank. We can generate a standard HTML template quickly. Just type an exclamation mark in the editor. We simply type an exclamation mark on the keyboard. Then we select the first auto-suggestion from the Emmet abbreviation feature. This creates our basic HTML template. The first line declares the document type. This tells the web browser how to interpret our code. For HTML5, we only need to write the word HTMLs here. This simple declaration tells the browser you are using the latest standard. Next, we have the main HTML tag. This tag wraps around two important sections. These sections are the head and the body of our web page. Inside the opening HTML tag, we find the lang attribute. This attribute sets the language for the entire web page. We are setting the language for our web page to English. We do this by typing the letters EN inside the opening tag. The head section comes next in our document. This part contains important metadata tags for the page. It is also where we place the title tag. The first meta tag defines the character set for our web page. We specify UTF-8 for this attribute. This encoding is the standard for HTML5. It supports nearly every character and symbol. This ensures all visitors can correctly view the text on our site. Our next metadata tag handles browser compatibility. It instructs older Internet Explorer browsers. They should use their most modern rendering engine. That rendering engine is called Edge. This metadata tag specifically helps users who are still using Internet Explorer. It ensures their browser uses the most modern rendering engine available. The viewport meta tag sets the page width to the device width. This ensures the layout adjusts for different screen sizes. On a mobile device, the page width will be smaller. On a larger laptop screen, the page width will be bigger. The viewport tag also controls the initial zoom level. This setting is called the initial scale. We set this value to 1 for our page. A value of 1 means 100% zoom level. Next, we have the title tag for our web page. This tag sets the title that appears in the browser's tab. You can see it currently says Documents by default. Let us open the browser to see our page. We can view the changes in real time. We can use the Live Server extension to view our project. Simply click the Go Live button in your editor. This will automatically open our website in your default web browser. In my specific case, this opens the page in Google Chrome. If we look at the Browser tab, the page title currently says Document. Let's move our browser window to the right side of the screen. This will let us view the live changes easily. We will position our Visual Studio Code window on the left side. Let's close the Explorer panel on the left side. This will give us a lot more room to see our code. Let us change the title of our web page. We will update it to the name of our project. The new title will be BMI Calculator. You can see the title has been updated in the Browser tab. It now displays BMI Calculator as its text. Let us look at the final version again. You can see a container element there. All of our content will be placed inside that container. Let's begin by creating our main container inside the body section. We will use a div element for this container. We type a period followed by the word container. We then press the Enter key. This action accepts the auto suggestion. The editor will generate a div element for us. This div will have a class named container. We will begin by creating the heading inside the container. This heading will be a large title using an h1 tag. We will also assign it a class called heading for styling. I have added this class for styling purposes. We will use CSS to style our website later. We need to target each element by its class. We are adding a class called heading to this element. Inside the h1 tag, we will type out the full text. We will write body mass index, which is commonly abbreviated as BMI. Finally, we will add the word calculator at the end. Let's check our browser preview now. We can see our title displayed at the very top. This title is now correctly set as Body Mass Index Calculator. It appears at the very top of our page. Following the title, we have two input fields. The first input field is for your height. The second input field is for your weight. Next, we add a label for the height input. The label will display the text your height. After the label, we write the unit centimeters. Finally, we place the input field right here. We assign the class name input to this element. We will use this class later for styling purposes. We also give this input field a unique ID of height. Currently, the input accepts regular text. We need to change its type to number. This ensures the user can only enter numerical values. This also allows us to increment and decrement the value with arrows. This input element uses the class name input for styling purposes. It also has a unique identifier of height for our JavaScript code. We will style this input field using its class. We will also target it with JavaScript using its unique ID. This allows us to retrieve the number the user types in. Let's set a default value for this height input field. For example, we can pre-fill it with 180 centimeters. When you first load the page, the height will be set to 180 centimeters. You can easily change this number to your own height. We also need to add a placeholder for this input field. This placeholder text will appear inside the box when it is empty. It serves as a helpful guide for the user. For the placeholder text, we will use enter your height in centimeters. You will see this placeholder text if the input field is empty. Our first input field is now complete. It is ready for the height information. Let us copy the first input for height. We will use the keyboard shortcut Alt, Shift, and the down arrow. This creates a duplicate line of code. Now we need to change a few details for the weight input. Replace the word height with the word weight. We must also change the unit from centimeter to kilogram. The input class remains the same. We will change the ID from height to weight. The default value should be 80 kilograms. The placeholder text should say, enter your weight in kilogram. We have now successfully created the first two input fields. These fields are for the user's height and weight. Next, we need to add the Calculate button to our project. This button will allow users to compute their BMI. We are going to give this button a class. This will help us style it later. This button will have a class called BTN. The class name BTN is simply short for button. I typically use the class name BTN for my buttons. We also need to add an ID to this button. This ID will be used later when we work with JavaScript. We can simply call this ID BTN as well. We need to write some text inside this button. Let's write the text Compute BMIs or Calculate BMIs. Next, we are going to add the result display. This will be another input field. It will show the calculated BMI value. Next, we will create an input field for the final result. This input will have the class of input. We will give it the ID of BMI result. This result input field does not need a placeholder. We will disable this input entirely. This prevents anyone from manually changing the calculated value. This input field is just for displaying the calculated BMI result. We do not want users to be able to type into it. We are going to disable this input field. This prevents anyone from typing into the result box. Following the button element, we have this additional information text located here. Next, we will create a heading element for the information text. This heading will have a specific class applied to it. The text inside will read weight condition. We will then place a span element right after this text. The dynamic result from our calculation will appear inside this span. We want to separate this text into its own element. This specific part will be dynamic content. We are going to update it later using JavaScript. We will assign this span an ID of weight condition. This ID will allow us to target the element with JavaScript later. Excellent! We have now completed the HTML structure for our form. In the final version, you can click the Compute BMI button. You will then see a weight condition result. This could display normal weight for a healthy input. For someone weighing 120 kilograms, it shows obesity. The result changes based on the calculated BMI value. The specific category displayed here depends entirely on the calculated BMI value. This value is determined by both your height and weight. We will use JavaScript to populate this element with dynamic content. For the moment, we are leaving the text area empty. That concludes the HTML structure for our BMI calculator. We have built all the necessary elements for the user interface. The current layout is a bit messy and unstyled. We will fix that in the next section using CSS. We are going to make it look beautiful and polished. It will match the final version you can see here. Next, we will focus on the visual design of our project. We are moving on to the CSS part of the tutorial. We just finished building the HTML structure for our project. That part is now complete. In this section, we are going to style our project using CSS. We will make the website look visually appealing. Our first step is to create a brand new CSS file. We will do this directly within Visual Studio Code. Let's navigate back to the Explorer panel. You can press Ctrl-Shift-E on your keyboard. Let's go up to the top of the Explorer panel. We will click the New File icon. We will name this file style with a .css extension. We have created our CSS file. We can start writing our CSS code inside this new file. Before we can use our new CSS file, we must connect it to our HTML. We will add a link in the HTML code to do this. Let's navigate back to our main HTML file. We will now add a link to our new CSS file. Navigate back to the index.html file. Place your cursor right after the closing title tag. Begin typing the word link. You will see several auto-suggestion options appear. Please select the third option from that list. This specific option is the one designed for linking a CSS style sheet. This link tag establishes the relationship between our HTML and CSS files. The href attribute points to the destination of our style sheet. This works because both files are located in the same directory. Inside the href attribute, we type style.css. We have our CSS file linked and ready. Let's begin by styling the body section of our web page. Let us begin with the body selector. We need to remove the default margin that browsers add automatically. We will set this margin value to 0. The margin has now been successfully removed from the body. Now let's change the background color for the entire page. The background should have a nice gradient color. You can see this in the final project preview. It transitions from a light blue to a light green. To create that gradient, we use the background property. We type in linear gradient for the effect. We want the color to start at the top right. That starting color will be a light green. Then it transitions to the bottom left. The ending color will be a light blue. We specified the direction as to left bottom. The first color we want is light green. It transitions from light green to light blue. Now, if you look at the final version of our project, you will notice the gradient color is repeating. This happens because we have not defined a height for the body. The background repeats when there is no height set. To center all of our content, we will use a flex display. This approach will neatly align everything in the middle. We are setting the display property to flex. Next, we set the minimum height to 100% of the viewport height. This ensures the element fills the entire screen vertically. The gradient now fills the entire screen completely. You can see it is a single, continuous color. The screen now occupies the entire browser window. It is using the full 100% of the viewport height. Notice how the size remains at 100%. This happens even when you adjust the zoom level. To center everything horizontally, we use the Justify Content Center property. For vertical centering, we simply apply the Align Items Center property. Next, we will change the font for all the text. I want to use a font called Courier New. We set the font family property to Courier New. This is the font you see here. This particular font is my personal favorite. You can absolutely use any font you prefer. You could also import different fonts from online sources. Google Fonts is an excellent resource for this. I have covered font importing in some of my previous tutorials. We have finished styling the body section of our page. The background gradient and layout are now complete. Now we are going to style the main container element. This container wraps around all of our content. Let's focus on the main container for our styling. This is the div element we created earlier with the container class. This element has a class attribute. We can target this class in CSS. We do this by adding a dot first. Then, we simply type container. Let's set the background color for our container. We will use RGBA, which stands for red, green, blue, and alpha. The alpha channel controls the transparency of the color. We choose the values 255, 255, and 255. This combination gives us a pure white color. We then set the transparency to 30%. This creates a nice transparent effect. We can see the background gradient color behind the white container. This creates a glassy, modern look for our container. This effect is often called neumorphism in design. Next, I will add some padding to the container. This creates space around the elements inside the container itself. We will set the padding to 20 pixels. This padding creates space inside the container. We change the display to flex. This initially lines items up side by side. Then we change the flex direction to column. This stacks all the items on top of each other. Our container is already looking much better. We still have several important styling details to address in this section. Next, let's give our container rounded corners. We can do this using the border radius property. Let's set the border radius to 5 pixels. We can now observe the rounded corners taking effect on our container. Let me zoom in a little closer. Now you can clearly see those rounded corners on our container. Next, let's create a nice shadow effect. We will add this shadow to the bottom of our container. We will apply a box shadow to the container. We set the horizontal offset to 0 pixels. The vertical offset is set to 10 pixels. This creates a shadow at the bottom. We will add a 10 pixel blur to soften the edges. This blur effect will appear on all sides. The current shadow is a bit too dark for our design. We can adjust this by using a color format that includes transparency. This will make the black shadow much less intense. We set the red, green, and blue values all to 0. This combination gives us the color black. We then set the transparency to 30%. This creates a beautiful shadow effect for our container. The container is touching the edges on smaller screens. This connection to the walls does not look good. Let's add a 5 pixel margin to the container. This will push all the content inward slightly. Let's take a look at our container. Everything seems to be shaping up nicely with the current styling. Now let's style the heading for our page. We can target the heading using its class name. Now let's style the main heading. This heading is our h1 element with the class of heading. We will target the heading class in our CSS file. We can change the font size to 30 pixels. This will make the heading a bit smaller. Now let's style the input fields. We have 3 separate inputs in our project. All of them share the same class name. We have 3 separate input fields here. They all share the same class name. We can target these input fields using the class selector.input. Let us begin by adding some padding around these elements. Let's add some padding to our input fields. We'll set 10 pixels of padding on the top and bottom. For the left and right sides, we'll use 20 pixels. Let's increase the font size to make the text more readable. We will set it to 18 pixels. We should also update the background color for a better appearance. I want to set the background color using RGBA values. We will use 255 for red, green, and blue to create white. The initial transparency is set to 30%. This 30% transparency seems a bit low for our design. Let's increase the transparency level to 40%. This will make the background a bit more visible. You can see the current border appears as solid black. Let's change that color to something more subtle. Let's change the border color to use RGBA as well. We will set the transparency to 50%. This creates a more beautiful and subtle border effect. Let's add some breathing room around our input fields. We will set the margin to 10 pixels. This padding creates some breathing room around each input field. It makes the layout more spacious and easier to read. Our input fields are looking quite good now. They have a clean and modern appearance. Let's move on to styling our button element now. We will apply CSS properties to make it visually appealing. Let's target the button element for styling. You can see it has a class called BTN. To target our button in the CSS, we use the class name BTN. Let's set the background color to a light green shade. This will give our button a fresh and vibrant appearance. We need to get rid of the default border on the button. We can easily do this by setting the border property to none. Instead of keeping this border, I will add a softbox shadow. This will make the button stand out and look more modern. Let us make this button look more attractive. We will begin by adding some padding around the text. Let's add some padding to the button. We will use 10 pixels on the top and bottom. Then we add 20 pixels for the left and right sides. We also want to round the corners. We can set the border radius to 5 pixels. Let us add a margin to this button. We will use the same margin value as the inputs. Next, we will set the font size to 20 pixels. This will make the button text larger and easier to read. Next, we will add a softbox shadow beneath our button. We set the horizontal shadow offset to 0 for perfect centering. We also set the vertical offset to 0 for even spacing. This makes the shadow spread equally around the entire button. We choose a blur radius of 4 pixels for gentle softness. We use an RGBA black color to control the transparency precisely. We keep the alpha at 30% for a subtle glow. When you move your mouse over the button, the cursor should change. It will show a pointing hand instead of the default arrow. This change gives us a pointing hand cursor. This cursor change clearly shows the button is interactive. Now let's add another effect for when we hover over the button. I want the shadow to become more prominent during a hover. We target the button for the hover effect. We use a special hover pseudo class in our styling. We target the hover effect specifically for our button. We change the box shadow to have 0 offset on both axes. We then set the blur radius to 8 pixels. This creates a larger blur than the previous shadow. We also set the color to black with 30% transparency. This change happens too quickly for a smooth effect. We can make this change feel smoother by adding a transition. We will apply the transition to all properties. We will set the duration to 300 milliseconds. We will also use an ease effect for a natural feel. You can see how the transition creates a smooth, gradual change. This makes the hover effect feel much more polished and professional. The final element we need to style is the weight condition text. You can find this text displayed at the very bottom of our container. We target this text element using its class name. The class for this text is InfoText. We adjust the font size to 20 pixels. This makes the text larger. We also set the font weight to 500. This makes the text appear thinner and sleeker. We have now completed all the styling for our project using CSS. The visual design is fully implemented and ready for the next step. Our website now looks just like the finished example. The styling is complete and matches the design perfectly. In our next section, we will make the button functional. We will add the ability to calculate the BMI. We will also calculate the weight condition category. This result will be determined by the calculated BMI value. We will use JavaScript to get the information from the inputs. We will then calculate the BMI. The result will be shown inside this specific input field. We will then display the corresponding weight condition. This will appear right here in the info text section. Get ready for the next section, covering the JavaScript part. In the previous section, we fully completed the project's CSS styling. In this section, we start adding interactive features to our project. We use JavaScript to react when users enter their details. We calculate BMI, update results on screen, and make everything feel responsive. Looking at the finished application demonstrates how the output changes instantly. For example, I will choose a height of 160 centimeters. I will also select a weight of 50 kilograms. After that, we can click the Compute BMI button. This action will calculate the person's body mass index. The result is based on a specific mathematical formula. Let me show you the formula we will be using. This BMI value will determine the person's weight condition. The possible categories are normal, obesity, underweight, or overweight. We will create these conditions using JavaScript if statements. These conditions will be based entirely on the calculated BMI value. The first step in our process involves creating a new JavaScript file. We need this file to write our code. Let us open the Visual Studio Code editor. We are going to open the File Explorer panel. You can do this by pressing the keys Ctrl, Shift, and E together. On the left side, you will find the Explorer section. Click the New File icon there. We are going to name this new file Index. We then add the file extension JS. This extension stands for JavaScript. We have created our JavaScript file at this point. We must now connect it to our HTML document. This process is similar to how we linked our CSS style sheet earlier. We navigate to the index.html file. We place the link right before the closing body tag. This is a crucial step. We must ensure all page elements are fully loaded. Our JavaScript needs to manipulate those elements. The script would fail if it ran too early. We start typing the letters SC. This triggers the autocomplete feature. We select the second suggestion from the list. This option includes the essential source attribute we need. The src tells the browser where to find your JavaScript file. In this example, both index.html and index.js are inside the same folder. Because they share the same location, the src only needs index.js. This keeps your path short, clear, and easy to manage. At this point, the JavaScript file is linked and ready. We can start using it to add behavior to our page. We can close the Explorer panel by dragging it left. This gives us extra space to write our JavaScript code. Let me walk you through the steps we will follow. To make this button react to clicks, we add an event listener. Each time the button is clicked, it will trigger our function. In the final version, clicking this button still does nothing. It does not trigger any action or calculation. We will first select this button element and access it. This button element has an ID called btn. This unique ID helps us easily select it using JavaScript. Using this ID, we can easily target the button in JavaScript. To do that, we create a constant named btn element. This will be equal to document, which represents the whole web page. Next, we use the getElementById method to target our button. We simply pass its ID name into the method. This button uses the ID btn. This ID helps JavaScript find and control it. At this point, we successfully have access to our button element. At this stage, we can attach an event listener to it. To add the click event, we call btn element.addEventListener. For this button, we want to listen for the click event. This means our code will run only when the user clicks it. After that, we want to run a function when clicking. Inside this function, we will calculate the BMI step by step. In this example, I will name the function Calculate BMI. At this stage, we need to create the Calculate BMI function. I will create a function called Calculate BMI. This function will run each time the button is clicked. Let us log a simple message to test our function. In the final version, press F2 to open the console. After opening, look at this area where messages will appear. To open it, click here and switch to the console tab. The console looks empty at first, which is completely normal. When you click the button, the function runs and prints clicked. This message appears because our function includes a console log. Every time we click the button, another clicked message appears in the console. This shows our function runs correctly each time we click. The event listener also responds perfectly, confirming everything is set up. Instead of just logging clicked, we will use these inputs. We will calculate the BMI using the height and weight. At the top, we have two input fields. One is for the height, and its ID is height. The other is for the weight, and its ID is weight. In the next step, we will access both input elements in JavaScript. We use the getElementById method to target each one. After that, we read their values and store them for calculation. Instead of console logging, we will create a new constant for height. We will call it HeightValue to keep the name clear. This constant targets the document object inside the browser window. It uses getElementById to select the input with ID height. After selecting that input, it reads its current value using .value. In the same way, we need another constant for the weight. I copy this line using Alt-Shift-Down arrow. After that, I change each word height to weight using Ctrl-D. I will remove the word height from both places. I will replace it with weight value to match the weight input. At this point, we have both values ready to work with. Let me log these values in the console. This helps us confirm they are correct. If I log the height value, we can clearly see that number. Logging the weight value as well confirms both inputs are captured. Each time we click the button, both input values appear in console. For example, change the first input to 50 and the second to 20. Next, click on Compute and you will see 50 and 20 displayed. We have access to both input values in JavaScript. This means we can use them directly to calculate the BMI. At this step, we calculate BMI using the height and weight. The correct formula is weight divided by height squared in meters. We receive the height in centimeters from the input. We must convert centimeters to meters by dividing the height by 100. After this conversion, the height value is in meters. We keep the weight in kilograms without any conversion. At this point, the height is in meters. This means we can correctly calculate the BMI. At this stage, we define BMI value using our formula. In this formula, use weight value divided by height value squared. I realize I explained the formula incorrectly the first time. Let me restate it clearly. In other words, it is weight divided by height times height. This gives us height squared in the denominator for our BMI. The height value is squared at the bottom of the fraction. The weight value goes on top as the numerator. The height must be in meters, not centimeters, before calculation. The weight must be in kilograms for the formula to work. At this point, we have successfully calculated the BMI value. At this stage, we can log the BMI value to double-check everything. With a height of 180 and weight of 80, the BMI becomes 24. If I change height to 100 and weight to 92, BMI becomes 21. At this point, we have correctly calculated the BMI value. Next, we want to display this BMI value inside that input field. To start, we first select this input inside JavaScript. We do that by using the getElementById method. We place it near the top because we only select it once. We do not need to select it every time we run. We only grab this element once and reuse it inside the function. In this step, I will create a constant named BMI input element. This constant will be equal to document.getElementById. The ID we are targeting is the BMI results element here. This input field uses the ID BMI results for targeting. At this point, I copy that ID and paste it inside getElementById. At this stage, we have the BMI value calculated. We will assign this value directly to the BMI input field. At this line, I simply type BMI input element as our target. Because this field is an input, we must update its value. We set its value equal to the BMI value we calculated. At this point, I paste the BMI value into the input. At this stage, clicking Compute BMI displays 24 inside the result input. If we change it to 190, the BMI updates correctly to 22. At this stage, we have finished the first part successfully. We calculated the BMI using the inputs. We also displayed the result clearly inside this BMI input. In this next step, we calculate the weight condition using BMI. In this part, we will add clear BMI-based weight conditions. These ranges follow standard health guidelines used by medical professionals. When the BMI value is below 18.5, we consider this person underweight. At the end, we need to display that text information here. In this part, we added a span element for showing messages. This span does not contain text yet. It only has the ID weight condition. For this reason, we must link this span to our script. At the top, I will create another constant named weight condition element. This constant will use document.getElementById to select the span. We pass in the same ID we copied, which is weight condition. At this stage, we update the span's text using our element. We change its inner text based on the BMI value. For an underweight result, we display the message underweight inside the span. In this example, a person is 180 centimeters tall. Their BMI result is 24. For example, imagine this person weighs only 50 kilograms. That weight is considered underweight for this height. If we calculate the BMI, the result is below 18. In this case, the BMI comes out to 15. At this point, the displayed weight condition clearly shows as underweight. In the next step, let us add the remaining conditions. For this part, add an else if with a second condition. When the BMI value is greater than or equal to 18.5, and when the BMI value is less than or equal to 24.9. In this range, update the weight condition element inner text. Replace underweight with the label normal weight for this category. For example, with 180 centimeters and 80 kilograms, the BMI is normal. This is normal because it is above 18.5 and below 24.9. Next, we will add the remaining BMI range conditions together. We still have two more conditions to add. First, use else if when the BMI value is 25 or higher. If the BMI value is 25 or higher, it becomes overweight. When the value is between 25 and 29.9, keep the label as overweight. If the BMI reaches 30 or more, change the condition to obesity. Whenever the BMI value is 30 or higher, label it obesity. This is a two-step process. First, we calculate the BMI value. Next, we use that BMI to decide the correct weight condition. With these conditions in place, our BMI calculator works correctly. At this point, our height value is 180 centimeters. With these inputs, the BMI falls within the normal range. If a person weighs 90 kilograms at 180 centimeters, they are overweight. If your weight is 120 kilograms, the result shows you are overweight. That value is extremely high, which clearly indicates a severe obesity condition. It seems the last condition is not working correctly here. This condition must check for BMI values strictly greater than 30. I made a small mistake in that condition earlier. At this point, a BMI of around 30 means obesity. This correction works properly, and the BMI categories are now displayed accurately. We have completed the final part of the project. We calculated the weight condition from the BMI value. We also displayed that condition clearly inside this span. That completes our project, and you have built a working BMI calculator. I hope you enjoyed this project and learned valuable new skills. You have learned helpful skills like calculating values using clear formulas. You practiced calling functions to organize code into reusable steps. You also added an event listener to make the button interactive. This project was simple, yet it clearly showed each JavaScript concept. I hope you enjoyed this project and learned useful JavaScript skills. Join me in the next project to practice even more.